Well, the next section deals with the very problematic area of time trouble, how to handle your clock. For me, this is a very simple one. You know, you should not get into time trouble in the first place if you could possibly avoid it. Yes, I mean, we all know players who are addicted to time trouble, and whatever they might tell you, though, their results suffer, you know, as a direct consequence of this. Now, I think here's a simple formula which will help you solve the riddle of your clock. Firstly, in the opening, you've got to play the opening moves that you know reasonably quickly. So spend no more than 1 minute per move, for instance, on the opening moves if you know them. You know, what's the point in spending ages over moves you already know? At the end of your theoretical knowledge, then I think it's time to have a good long think to plan for the middle game. So as soon as you get out of your theoretical knowledge, sit down, have a good long think. Various critical positions arise in a game of chess, those positions where you have to spend more time. You know, this is inevitable, and this is what eats into the clock of a lot of players. But coming into the first time control, I believe you should leave yourself with no less than 1 minute per move for the last 10 moves. So, for instance, if you're coming in, you've got 10 moves to make, you should have no less than 10 minutes on your clock. And for the last move before the time control, because statistically this is where the most mistakes occur, around move 40 for instance, you should leave yourself with 2 minutes for that last move, just to avoid the problem of making a mistake. And why not be disciplined about this? You know, because time trouble, you don't want time trouble to ruin a wonderful position. This is so depressing when it happens, and it happens to a lot of players. So 1 minute per move for the last 10 moves, and for the last move before the time control, no less than 2 minutes to make that move. Finally, I should mention the new incremental time control, which has come into practice in many FIDE tournaments recently. Say, for instance, 100 minutes for the game plus 30 seconds per move. At all costs, you know, you've got to avoid long, exhausting time scrambles at the end of the game. So you can't really get chronically short of time in those games. I haven't played many of those games myself, I'm sure I will. But whatever you do, do not get chronically short of time, because you can end up a nervous wreck, I think, playing at 30 seconds a move for hours. I've seen this happen to juniors in World Junior Championships when I've been seconding over there, and it just ruins them. Their energy just gets drained out by this exhaustion of having to play a move after move at 30 seconds. I mean, the tension is unbelievable. So I can sum it up simply by saying don't get into time trouble. You know, follow the instruction which I've just given you, and you should be okay. Now, just to show you how ruinous time trouble can be, I've chosen a very famous example for you from the Korchnoi-Spassky match, Belgrade 1977, where White builds up a fantastic position with brilliant strategical play, but leaves himself chronically short of time and then blunders horribly at the end and loses. Of course, there was a lot of tension at this particular match. Chess historians will probably know this. There was a lot of aggro. The two players were at each other's throats, and there were some very strange goings on. I think Korchnoi won 4 games in a row, then he lost 4 games in a row. It was that type of match, you know. And this game was played at the time of the match where Korchnoi was still playing brilliantly, but he was losing games. He was becoming affected by the psychological warfare that Spassky was adopting at this stage. So let's just see this game, and as a warning, really, of what might happen to people who get into time trouble. So Korchnoi's white and Spassky's black. Not going to dwell too long on the opening moves because it's a Stonewall Dutch formation. But generally the Stonewall Dutch formation actually reacts better when white plays an early d4. And this is why I wouldn't really recommend black's formation, because, you know, white's been allowed to play very elastically here. And yes, he does play d4, but this idea of having the pawn on e3 and the knight on e2 makes it far more difficult for black to get to grips with the white formation. You know, black would much rather prefer white's knight to be on f3 in this particular position. Anyway, white went d4, black played d5, white played b3, and black played bishop d7. Bishop b2, not much to say about this particular manoeuvre by black, only that if there's a defect to the pawn formation that black adopts, it must be the fate of this bishop. You know, what is black going to do with this bishop? Spassky tries to reroute the bishop. Maybe the bishop will come out to h5 at some point. The modern preference would be, actually, if we just retract to b3, to maybe play a move like b6 and put the bishop on b7 or a6 with a view to playing c5. That would be a very modern way to handle the position. But it seems as though Spassky wants trench warfare in this game, and he just prefers this bishop manoeuvre, which looks a bit ponderous. Knight f4, very good move, because it points the finger at the weakness in black's formation, and stops, of course, bishop h5. So Spassky is forced to put his bishop on a rather passive square, and the knight comes to d3. Traditionally highlighting the e5 square, which is, you know, a square white would very much like to control the whole game through, because with black's pawn still on e6, he can't really free his game. So I think we can say that white has emerged from the opening with a clearly superior game. Okay, knight bd7. But of course, black's position is very tough. We'll have to say that. Queen to c2. Rook to c8. Pawn to c5. b6. b4. Another interesting finesse you might have observed in this position, that white hasn't castled yet. In fact, he's deliberately delaying castling, I think. This is the brilliance of Korchnoi strategical concept. Because in fact, in this game, actually a bit later on, white castles long. I think Korchnoi devised this idea of maybe, you know, a long-term attack against the black king, you know, maybe right at the start of the game almost. But you know, such a scheme, a grand plan, requires great exactitude, and this was probably costing Korchnoi a lot of time at this stage. Anyway, Spassky went g5, knight e2, bishop g6, and now the first sign that Korchnoi has ambitions against the black king. Pawn up to h4. Excellent move. Well, I think, you know, h6 is more or less forced. g4 is just such a horrible move. I mean, it gives white complete control of f4 and e5 in this position, and well, for instance, this will be a very good move to start off with. For instance, white could look forward to a move like f2, f3 in the near future. It's not as if the king side's blocked, because white can prise open the king side with f2, f3. g4 would give white the advantage on both sides of the board. So this is probably why Spassky just plays h6. But of course that allows white to open the h-file. So h takes g5, h takes g5, and knight went into e5, attacking the bishop. To take on e5 would be a big concession. Spassky went bishop h7. If he takes, pawn takes, and then for instance a move like knight d7, well then I think white has a number of really very attractive moves here. Knight d4 looks very good to start off with, and then some sort of penetration on the h-file. Spassky will be very unwilling to let white have control of the d4 square in this manner. So bishop h7 was played. f3, another excellent move, just preparing e4, preparing g4. We don't quite know yet, but anyway, white has all the trumps here. B takes c5, d takes c5, opening up the diagonal for his bishop. Knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, knight d7, bishop b2, bishop f6, and now it turns out that white gets the d4 square anyway, but the difference between this position and the last is that the black pawn chain is more mobile. Black can think about moving his pawns forward at some point. Not right now, of course, because if he moves into e6, e5, the white knight simply hops into e6 and takes away black's exchange. So queen e7 is about forced in this position. And now another extremely good move by white, f4. Shutting down the bishop on h7 and activating his own bishop. So quite brilliant strategical play by white, completely outmanoeuvring Spassky and outplaying him in every area of the board. You would really expect Korchnoi to go on and win this game from this position. Rook f7 was played. Castle's on the queen side. Very unusual in a Dutch. But as I say, the way that White played the opening allowed him this possibility. A5. Well, an attempt at counterplay. Again, if you're in a worse position, you should complicate. So this is exactly what Spassky's trying to do. This is true at the highest level as much as it is for us. Black takes. G4. Bishop f1. Bishop takes d4. And now, reading Ray Keane's account of the story in his book on the match, he says, that everybody watching was deeply impressed with the way that Korchnoi was playing this game. He's played magnificently to this point. The only problem was that to get to move 40 now was a real struggle for him because there had perhaps a couple of minutes left. Now I'm saying this is a silly way to handle the clock. I think that's what I'm trying to say, because there's nothing worse in chess than completely outplaying the opponent, playing beautiful strategical chess, and then messing it up at the end. You won't believe what happens in this game. It's almost impossible to believe what happens. Just take a look. Okay, bishop takes d4 was played. Now this is the first sign. This is the first move that Korchnoi would never have played if he had more time, because I think simply rook takes d4 is a winner, because White's got two ideas in this position that Black is, virtually powerless to stop. The first idea is the rook retreat, rook d2 and then rook h2. And once White doubles rooks on the h-file, Black is dead. Couple this with the idea of queen to c3, and you can quickly see that Black's position is crumbling. So that would have won the game. Instead, bishop takes d4 is almost a reflex action, but never mind, it should still win. And with Korchnoi being chronically short of time, of course, Spassky continues to complicate the game. Why not? So pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn. Bishop d3. Knight comes into f3. Well, what should White do in this position? The move he came up with was quite unbelievable. You'll never be able to guess it if you don't know the game. But it's a direct result of his chronic time shortage. It's almost a tragic move. See if you can see it before we go on. Well, Korchnoi played bishop takes f5. Double question mark. He just thought, okay, well, Black can't take this piece. Not much to... I think if we just drop back, if we go bishop b2, maybe you could try this, maybe sacrifice a pawn, something like this. White would still have good winning chances in this particular game because, how's Black going to defend himself on the long diagonal? There are ideas of queen c3 again and penetration down there, so this will be a very difficult position for Black. But bishop takes f5 was nothing short of a tragedy here. And after rook takes f5, Korchnoi went on with the terrible queen takes f5. The idea was, of course, if bishop takes f5, he goes bishop takes f5 in this position. Rook h8 is actually checkmate. But what he missed was that he couldn't play rook h8 now because Black defends himself with king f7. So after queen takes f5, bishop takes f5, after magnificently outplaying his opponent, he's got nothing better than to resign this position. So a tragic loss there from a totally winning position. A good lesson to all of us about the perils of time trouble and why you should never get into time trouble in the first place.